Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I've gotten a little distracted. So I was painting away the Cathay Army ready for an update video for you guys, and my mind was wandering, as I'm sure a lot of your minds are wandering currently, to 40k with the impending 11th edition release. And for me, when I start thinking of 40k, it doesn't take very long before I start thinking about chaos. And in this case it's Red Corsairs. They are a project or an idea or a faction that I just keep coming back to. I've done multiple videos for them over the years on the channel, and my buddy Dan's doing some at the minute. You can go and follow his progress over on Miniature Realms podcast. We've had the new releases. I just can't stop thinking about them, and I need to do something about it. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to start a whole new army, although there's some ideas behind that I might talk about at the end of the video. But I need to get this out of my head so it doesn't keep distracting me. And the thing that I love most about Chaos in 40k is that barbaric fantasy element that they have. And it all really stems from this wonderful period in 2nd edition, where we got the 2nd edition Chaos Codex, and John Blanche was producing all this artwork, and the studio were producing all these minis. And John Blanche did this 2-page spread of various drawings of different Chaos Legions. And he wrote about how you could convert them and what you could do to make them look like those legions. And it often involved using lots of fantasy pieces on them, so furs and skulls and spikes and all the good stuff, the proper barbaric stuff. And I say that is what I really love about them. Secondly, there is an account, Colty, Carrie's account, who's one of my sort of hobby heroes. I absolutely love their stuff, and quite a few years ago now, they did a Red Corsairs project that's always stuck in my mind. It just looked really, really nice. So that, coupled with, say, Andy Chambers' Chaos, John Blanche's Chaos, the pictures from that era, I can't get them out of my head. I need to do something that is inspired by them, not directly derivative of them, but inspired by them. And I've just given in, really. I've just given into temptation. I fancied doing it, so I put down the brushes on the Cathay. I picked up a couple of kits. I thought, I'm going to make a Red Corsairs model. I'm going to film it. We can have a chat. We can see what I've learned along the way. There's lots of new stuff in here, probably tons of mistakes as well. But I'd love to know if you've got those types of projects that maybe it's time we just started doing them. Stop sitting on it. Stop daydreaming of them forever and ever. Just pick up a brush and have a go. And let's see where it takes us. And that's exactly what this video is about. I hope you enjoy. Let's paint. So I'm sat on loads of different kits from collecting over the years and doing videos here on YouTube. And one of the nicest things about the Red Corsairs is you can kind of use any marine kits you want from any faction, from any of the Chaos factions, from a lot of the Loyalist stuff, and can turn them into Red Corsairs, which has a huge appeal as well. I think the idea of using what I've got rather than going out and buying new stuff is very appealing. Now, certainly a top 5 kit for me of all time are the Chaos Terminators. I remember back being a kid, I remember when they were released, going through the back of White Dwarf, phoning up mail order and ordering them. It's those tusked helmets I think are just amazing. But we've got some new Terminator models. So we've got the Space Wolf ones, and we've got the Loyalist, the regular Loyalist chapter Terminators, and they are a little bit bigger, a little bit more to them than the Chaos Terminator kit. So I thought, well, why not kitbash them together? Let's see what we can do. So I grabbed the Wolfguard box, grabbed a pose I like, and you know, they've really lent into the fur thing with the Red Corsairs as a visual cue, which I love. Again, it ties into all that barbarism type thing. So I've just gone with it, really. And everything in this project is meant to be very, very relaxed. I'm just having fun here. I'm not trying to execute anything flawlessly. This is just getting an idea out of my head. And that's right the way through, from conversion or kitbash here through to paint. One kit that I've found myself using loads, and if you are a Chaos fan, I highly recommend grabbing, is the 8-bound kit from the World Eaters. I don't particularly love the base models at all, but they've got tons of really cool mutated parts and really gnarly looking weapons. So here I've taken one of the chain axes from that, and I'm using it as the head on the axe of this Wolfguard model. Smooshing together the parts from the 2 kits, it wasn't too difficult. They don't fit perfectly. There is a little bit of snipping that you need to do, and a little bit of plastic glue and encouraging to get them to meld together. but it's good enough, it's nice enough. And again, when I look back at those models that John Blanche did, that Colty has done, Carey has done, Colty the account has done, and Andy Chambers has done, that these aren't flawless minis. They don't look perfect. You know, you'll see little gaps, you'll see little paint marks that maybe shouldn't be there, or shouldn't be, that's the right word, but aren't perhaps where you know you would expect them to be, and it just doesn't matter, because they evoke a feeling, and it's exactly what I'm trying to achieve with this project. I want to look at this model and get the feeling of, what are these guys? What are the Red Corsairs? Who are these terrifying, sort of piratical space marines, you know, that are reaving around sort of space and just, you know, causing trouble. So it's been a very, very freeing experience. I think particularly because recently I've been trying to focus more on my neatness in many projects. This is an opportunity to not overly worry about neatness. So it's not about being sloppy, but it's not about letting things hold me back because I'm not realizing them absolutely perfectly, absolutely flawlessly on the Mini. So there's lots of times during this process that things haven't quite gone to plan. So like here, one of the old bits of background, I don't know if it's still current, about the Red Corsairs is they tended to just paint across or carve across through their old symbols, their old chapter symbols, to show that they, you know, that their fealty was to Huron now, not to their old masters. And I thought, I can use my new tool to sort of, you know, gouge out across and it'll look cool. It didn't. It looked awful. So I'm just here. I'm just what's the word? Grinding it down and smoothing it out. And then I took the opportunity to use a few of the little trinkets off the Red Corsairs upgrade sprue just to add on to the model. I want this to like a mini in its own right, not just a couple of kits I've smushed together. So, and I always think with that sort of thing, little details make a big difference. So rather than having him covered in these pristine wolf tails that the wolves always are, I'd leave a few of those on there to show his origins, but then snip a few off here and there and add some slightly more gruesome trinkets and trophies onto the model. And I think it worked. Yeah, I think it worked pretty well, to be honest with you. It certainly was a ton of fun. And again, the Red Corsairs, you can make every single model a hero. That's also a hugely appealing thing for an army project, one that you can pick up and put down. And consistency isn't as important because they're not meant to be consistent. They're all meant to be these individuals that are coming together to form this big, you know, war band. So you see, largely it's the Wolfguard Terminator model and the Chaos Terminator model, various parts from each. They do go together fine. Like, don't stress about it. But this was, you can see the front shin, the greave. It's not perfect. I haven't smoothed it off absolutely perfectly. I haven't necessarily filled in all the runes perfectly on this, but it doesn't matter. This, you know, this isn't a display piece. This is a without sounding artsy fartsy. This is just about creating something and enjoying the creation process and seeing what I learn along the way. This model doesn't really have any other job than just enjoy and daydream and love doing what we love doing in the hobby. But I think he looks pretty cool, to be honest. So next up, it was time to paint him. The painting is where there's probably the most radical departure from stuff I'm typically doing. I'm just showing off the sub-assemblies I've done here. So a few things are blue tacked on, the arms are blue tacked on, the pads are blue tacked to them, and the head's blue tacked to that. And that's simply just so it's easier to get in and work on the main body initially. I will glue it together as soon as I'm able to. I prefer working on the model once it's all together. Now, about a year ago, I did a Death Guard model, and I still think about it. I had a really, really good time painting that model. And there was a few things from it that I wanted to try and bring into this project. And one of those was the way that I applied the Armour colour, which was an oil wash over a pre-shade. But I was sat sort of pondering how to do the red and this, that and the other. And then I started thinking about shading it and highlighting it and what happens when you use white versus yellow and that sort of thing. And I particularly like on Colty's Red Corsairs, they've got that more orange red. I thought that was really, really nice. I read a few things about what you can shade red with, and in the past I've used green and that sort of thing, and I didn't realise that made it look more neutral. I thought that's interesting. I'll keep that in the back pocket for future projects, but I didn't want it to look particularly neutral for this. So I thought, well, I wonder what happens if I do more colourful pre-shades. So I've used a purple and a peach colour here, so purple and an orange colour, to do my pre-shade with. These are both mini colour paints. They don't need to be mini colour or anything. I'm also using those quite a lot at the moment because they're going to be out really soon, and there are paints, and I love using them. But what they are is not overly important. It's more the colours here that we're using, and I wasn't sure how much of a difference they would make under the oils. I think they made a huge difference. I also did a few test pieces not using oils and just using normal paints, and they made a big difference there as well. So definitely think I'm going to be exploring different colour pre-shades going forwards. But as I mentioned, the main colour of the armour that I did on the Death Guard Marine, I did using an oil wash, quite a thick oil wash. And you may have noticed, particularly around Christmas time and in many videos over the years, I do something called oil dot filtering, which is where we put little dots of oil over a model, smoosh them together, and it creates a slightly see-through layer over the top of whatever's underneath, and it tints it and it colours it in different ways, and it's I think quite interesting, quite nice. I wondered what would happen if I did that to create the actual main colour of the armour. So a more densely dotted oil dot filtering. I don't know what the phrase is for it. Essentially, I'm just going to be painting with oils. I've never attempted to paint a whole model with oils, and I haven't here, to be honest with you, but I'm doing the whole armour colour using the oils here. So I'm using the Absalon 502 range by AK Interactive. I really like them. They are a really great range of colours for our hobby. They are relatively inexpensive, particularly once we compare them to sort of art shop ones, Winsor & Newton and things like that. And they also cure and dry off a little quicker than many other oils, which is particularly useful, I find, for the way that I paint. So all I've got is I've popped those down on a little piece of cardboard as a palette. You could use plastic palette, glass palette, whatever you want, pop a bit of cardboard for a palette. Then I'm grabbing all my various synthetic brushes that I use for when I'm oil painting. Now, I like this Graduate series by Dale Rowney. That is simply because I went into a garden centre, actually, and they were there, and I thought, oh, they're pretty inexpensive. They might work. Tried them out. I actually think the Citadel synthetic brushes are pretty decent, so I've got a few of those that I use. And then I've got one fairly nice natural hair brush, not quite good enough for normal painting anymore, but certainly good enough for accurate application of my oil paints. So here over the acrylic base, which is completely dry, it's not varnished, there's nothing like that. As long as your acrylic paint is dry, you're not going to have any reactions with the oil or the white spirits or anything like that. I'm going to start applying the oil in the areas I want it, and I'm using my pre-shade as a guide of where the highlights and the shadows are. Don't worry, most of it does go on camera. I do go off a few times, but most of it's managed to keep most of it in shot. But yeah, using that as a guide of the placement, I should have done what I always recommend and started on the back of the model. And as you get a bit more confident, then you do the main bit. But instead, I've dived straight in here and done the main focal point, which is the chest. But never mind, it didn't work out too bad in the end. But you can see here I'm smooshing, I think, a little bit too much oil here. Certainly as I did the panels later, I was a little more sparing. I think it looks slightly better. But I'm just working these different reds and the orange colour in. And then I apply a little bit of the dark colour into where the recesses are. Excuse me. And we've got ourselves more or less sort of ready to now smoosh. So I grab one of the synthetic brushes, one of the larger brushes, I pop it in the mineral spirits, the white spirits, and I take off nearly all of it on a piece of kitchen paper. So you can see here the brush is ever so slightly damp with the spirits, but it's not flooding off the brush or anything like that. And now I'm simply going to up and down, and move side to side and blend those colours onto the miniature. And we start to colour it in. And oil paints blend beautifully. It's a hell of a lot easier to blend them together than it is acrylics. But it's also, they do give you a different look. And I really like this. I'd done a bit of a tester on another model quickly, just a couple of parts of a Terminator, and really liked it. And then just launched into trying this on the video. Now I'm sure I could execute this better the next time I do it, but even for more or less a first run, I thought this looked pretty nice. I was pretty excited about it. I would really like to know any concerns you have around using oil paints or challenges you've come up against. If you pop them down in the comments, they are paints I have used since I got back in the hobby, and I love using them. in different quantities on different projects, but I just know that there's still a little bit of stigma around them, and I would love to try and help remove that. And so if you've thought about using oils and you stopped yourself, or you've had a go and you didn't enjoy it, please let me know in the comments what happened, and let's address it in some videos. Let's do a bit more of a focus on this, because they're a really cool tool. You know, they're certainly not exclusive. I don't think I'd ever paint a model all in oils, but equally I can't remember the last time I didn't use oils in some capacity on one of my paint jobs. So here you can see I'm doing the shin and the foot, and you can still see that pre-shade showing through. And again, the nice thing is the areas where it was a little thinner, where I maybe used too much thinner, and therefore the coat was more translucent, and the purple and stuff you could see underneath. I just really enjoyed the look of it. See here, I felt that the highlight, there wasn't enough of the orange there. So once it's done, I just go back in and add a bit more of the orange. And you can do the same with the shadow as well. Just be sparing, probably a little more sparing than you're seeing me be here on the video. And that's simply just because it means it will dry quicker. There's two things to talk about with oils. There's drying and there's curing. They do get conflated, and it can get a little bit confusing. But for me, when I'm talking about drying, I'm talking essentially about the model being dry to the touch, not necessarily the oil being fully cured. I very rarely ever wait for the oil to be fully cured on my model before moving on, because of how I paint it. I haven't found it. I need it to be fully cured before I move on. So that was the red. I thought it looked pretty flipping cool, if I'm honest, and it was a ton of fun to do. It was very, very relaxing, and that was, again, one of the aims of this project was it stick some music on and just paint a mini like I don't do it for a living, you know, just daydream and do what I like, and hopefully make something interesting out of it, but not worrying about that. Then I tried the black, and I took a very similar approach to do the black as I did the red. If I do any more of these, and I really would like to, but I don't know, if I do any more of them, I would base coat the black with acrylics, just because I see absolutely no reason and benefit from base coating it using the black oil like I've done here. There's no nuance to it. I'm not seeing any of the pre-shade showing through whatsoever. It just took longer. So the next time, I would just either brush paint it acrylic black, or airbrush it acrylic black, and then do the other oils over the top, more like that traditional dot filtering, but also do a little bit of rendering with it. So as by that I mean use the lighter colours to help define some of the areas of light and shade and shape on the different parts of the model. But I've left it in full anyway. As I say, I wanted to show all the things that did work and all the things that didn't work. It was still fun to do. Like, there was nothing, pardon me, there was nothing wrong with it. It's just inefficient and in no way better than doing in acrylics. Sorry, it's a couple of days before MPO when I'm filming this, so I'm been talking on the phone a lot, getting things organised. So if I've got a slightly croaky voice, I apologise. So here's you going in with the white and the purple, just trying to create those areas of highlight on the model, and then I shall smoosh them together with a bigger brush in a second. But yeah, sorry if the start of this video was a little bit, well, I guess if you're still here, you didn't mind the start of it, but I was a bit worried it was a little bit full on, I don't know, overly effusive. I'm just feeling very positive at the moment about the hobby, my personal hobby, and I'm really finding the love for it again. And I don't know what direction that's taking me in, and I'm enjoying finding that out. And it feels like a lot of projects recently on the channel have been quite different to each other, maybe similar miniatures, but the approach to painting them has been quite different, and it's been really fun finding out what's the more satisfying ways of painting, but also what helps me realise that picture I've got in my head of what I wanted. I'm still trying to improve myself and educate myself and learn more, but also trying to take that little bit of time to just sometimes just do stuff because I enjoy it and not worry about, you know, progression kind of thing. Just enjoy it more. So that's the black done on the Mini. What am I showing you here? Not sure. Time to do decals. So once I got all the colours laid out how I wanted them, the model was dry to the touch. It was absolutely fine for me to varnish over it. I've done this for 10 years. I haven't had any issues doing this. So this is how I do it. I'm using a polyurethane gloss varnish, mixing up in one of our Cult of Paint signature series Evolutions by Harder and Steebet. The links for that and all the other things we do are down in the description. I'm spraying that through at about 25 psi, and I give the model a good few coats. You can see on his shin there, actually, I was a bit too rough with the brush when I was applying some extra shadow, and it went through the oil and it went through the airbrushed paint through to the primer, which was a shame, but it doesn't matter. I just turned it into some weathering, I think. Now, the reason I wanted to do the decals at that stage was so that I could do a little bit more colour variation on the model over the top of the decals and help blend them into the paintwork a little bit more. This is my little tester that I mentioned a minute ago, just to see what was working. And I quite liked how that seemed a little more faded. And I think partly that's because I applied the oil a little more sparingly on that one. But also, I think I had more of that lighter ochre colour. So I grabbed an even lighter ochre colour here and thought I'd do a little bit of just the dot filtering with it here. So much fewer of the dots and focusing them mainly in the areas of highlight. And then just doing exactly what I mentioned before, streaking top to bottom with the brush to blend them in. And just bring a little bit more of that sort of life and stuff into the mini. I also apply a few dots of the darker brown colour here as well if I felt some of the shadows were lacking. And here you can see just really, really gently, just buffing them, sort of blending that into the paintwork. And I really love as well on the Red Corsairs, I got this idea of I wanted the different panels to potentially look like they've been painted at a different time. I don't know why it is that all Chaos Marines basically have gnarly armour that isn't as well looked after. I'm sure there must be loads that still really care about it being looked after, but it's also a cool look when it's all done like this. So I quite like that idea that, you know, this Marine had, you know, maybe he'd been with the Red Corsairs for a couple of centuries and there's parts of his armour that have had to be replaced and there's parts that have been repainted and haven't been repainted, and therefore the red wasn't always going to be the same across every panel. Partly because it's fun and partly because it gives me a really easy out for if it isn't consistent across the model. And the manner in which I've painted this doesn't lend itself necessarily to brilliant consistency, I think, across an army. But if that doesn't matter, and if that is even a deliberate thing, brilliant. We can work with that, right? And then I went in and just acrylic painted the areas of black that I hadn't done with the oil. As I say, that's when I realised there was no value in me having done it anyway. I should say, after I had done the decal stage, which I will link up in the top if I remember our video about decals, I did the gloss varnish, I applied the decals, I did another gloss varnish, and then I did a matte varnish over that. That's what you've then seen me painting over the top of. That's why the model isn't super glossy. Here I've gone in for Towlite Ochre, so another light ochre colour, and I'm just starting to do some scratches, really, or little tippy-tappy chips, little scratches, sort of edge highlighting, I suppose, but not really. But just bringing in definition between the different armour panels, but also starting to bring in some life and character and story into the armour. And this is just one of my favourite things to do, really, when it comes to painting. So doesn't get much better than painting a Chaos Terminator in this style. And I don't think I've painted a Chaos Terminator since I was a kid. And that surprised me when I realised it. But also that's probably one of the reasons why I've had more fun than I can remember the last few days painting this model up for this video. For the black, doing exactly the same. I've tried to mimic what I did with the oil, so I've used a little bit of a purpley grey here, petroleum grey, and then Drake grey by Scale 75 and by P3. They've both got a little bit of purple or pink in them, and just doing lots of little scratches to do that highlight with. And this is how I think I would do the black armour. I don't really think the oil way was any better than this way. So I would probably just do this way for across all of the black armour, just because it would be more efficient if we were trying to be efficient with what we were doing. If we weren't being efficient, we were just relaxing and enjoying it. It doesn't matter which way you do. It doesn't matter if you do both, like I've done on this. Both look cool. Both were fun to do. I've done some hazard stripes on a few weapons recently, so I'm not going to include a super long tutorial on how I've done it, because I actually think I did a better job of it in the Dark Wolves video and the Behemoth video I did on the War Machine model over on our Patreon. Actually, I should just say thank you very, very much to all of you that support us over on Patreon. If you would like to get more videos from myself, and particularly from Andy, working through display pieces, but also our personal gaming pieces and just fun, really, any other projects that we're doing, then consider going and checking out the Patreon. If it wasn't for you guys, we simply couldn't do what we do. We wouldn't be able to produce all the videos here on YouTube, do the podcast, the miniatures range, all the other stuff that we do at Cult is down to the support we get from you guys over on Patreon. So thank you ever so much for all of that. But yeah, I think there's always a risk with Red Corsairs because they're red, right? It's Red Marines. What are you going to do? Are they Blood Angels? Are they Khorne? Are they this, that, and the other? So I wanted to try and make sure it didn't look particularly cornate. And I thought, well, I won't use much gold or brass on them. And I thought I'll use something like some hazard stripes as a secondary kind of colour on the model, because again, I don't typically associate that with a Khorne miniature. We know it looks great. I know it looks great. I really like how red and yellow look together on Marines. That potentially a spoiler for an upcoming summer project over on Patreon. But I think about Titan Legions and that colour scheme as well that I really, really enjoy. But I did it using a mini colour yellow, and it wasn't quite right. I did a little bit of glazing with some Mornfang and stuff, and it still wasn't quite right. It wasn't warm enough, so I just went and grabbed Nazdrake yellow and gave it a quick coat of that. Actually, the axe is probably a good example of most of this project, which was not worrying about getting things correct the first time I did them. And if I needed to go back and correct them or entirely change them on the model, I just did. I didn't stress about that. It wasn't time lost. It was just adapting and seeing what worked, really, and not worrying about, it's giving me a slightly bumpy finish on this part of the mini or whatever, because it didn't matter. The end look of this model was not negatively affected by me choosing to do that. Now, it would have been if I was working on maybe a primarily airbrushed SA Eldar miniature I was doing, where I was trying to be accurate and neat and tidy, very deliberate with everything I did on it. That kind of thing would affect the overall look, and I wouldn't enjoy that. As in, I wouldn't enjoy that effect it had on the model. I do enjoy painting like that. So it was very nice and refreshing to paint in this way, as I said, because I think I have been focusing more on that. And hopefully what comes out of it all is a happy middle ground for future projects. Here I'm going in and doing the hazard stripes, which are just the worst by hand, but they just look so cool. They're very Warhammer. They're worth doing. A lovely side effect of the mini colour paints is you can reactivate them with water if you need to. Cramping up here. I filmed the entire process. I haven't bothered putting the video in, but yeah, got a really bad cramp in my hands doing those hazard stripes. But yeah, one of the nice things about the mini colours is you can use a little bit of water to correct them if you catch them soon enough. So I definitely use those when I'm doing things like checkers and hazard stripes now. And one of the most important things I find with hazard stripes is going in and weathering up where the two colours meet. I think it really helps sell the effect. But as I say, the Dark Wolves video and the Behemoth one over on Patreon, I think I do a much better job of a hazard stripe weapon or hazard stripe covering. So I'm not going to talk too much about what I did with this one. I don't want to bother going into too many details or too much detail about the various details on the model, because I have executed them all far better on other miniatures. So for instance, if you'd like to see how I've done the fur, go and check out the recent Saturnine Terminator Wolflord. I focus in on the fur a lot there. I've just followed the same idea with that. The wooden stakes on the trophy rack are the rotten wood tutorial I did a few years ago. I figured why not just fall back on some of my favourite recipes or methods that I've done in the past and use them on this mini. That the armour was so new for me, it was nice to just use stuff that I already knew would work for other elements of the model. The horns here, the tusks, I've done exactly like how I do on the dedicated bone and horn video. So I will link all of those up if you'd like to see specific. I don't want to repeat myself endlessly in the videos if I think I've done it well elsewhere. Let me know, but I appreciate some people will be coming to this first time. But if you'd like to know about the process, those videos are dedicated to it, and I think are far better. These were another element of me not getting things right first time. I really like glowy lenses on Marines, and I was going to do the classic glowy green. I just say classic, the glowy green that I do on many Space Marine lenses. But I recently read a thing about how blue affects red, and essentially blue makes your red look more red. And I thought that might be an interesting thing to do on these models. And then I noticed on the box art that they'd given them blue lenses as well, and I'm sure that was the reason. I'm sure they're far more knowledgeable on colour theory than I am. But one of the issues you'll find with blue, and this is something I've come across in the past and didn't realise was sort of factual, as it were, is getting a fluorescent glowy blue is much trickier than getting your other, say your greens, for instance. So I tried the same process that I've done with the green. It just didn't quite sort of come out quite right. But one of the things that I was learning, again on this miniature, it's been so useful to sort of solidify certain things in my mind, was blocking in as much of the model as possible before necessarily making a final decision on elements of it, but I needed to block them in. So I was like, well, just leave the eyes how they are, and you can tweak them later if you need to. So I can see here looking at the model, I'm like, yeah, the eyes need to pop more. The whole face just goes a bit murky. What can I do to improve that? So I felt like, okay, I need to address the tusks. I think they're too dark. I need to lighten the tusk up. I need to brighten up the eyes a little bit more. So those were the first sort of two key things. The other bits I actually really like, the wolf tails, the leather colours I'd chosen, the fur colour I'd chosen, that worked great. So I just went and sort of refined those a little bit so they looked right. But I gave the whole model a coat of matte varnish just because we had things like contrast paints on there, which can affect the finish, give us quite an unpleasant sort of shiny finish. So just gave the model a couple of coats of that MIG matte varnish that you saw me there through the airbrush before I moved on to, the next few stages. So one of those was going to be weathering, and this was something I was going to use to add a little bit of definition into the model, as well as dirt and grime. So if you think at the moment we haven't done anything to do with separating the armour panels, perhaps you would do a traditional pin wash or an acrylic wash or an all-over wash with contrast, something like that, to make the recesses darker. So here I wanted to try and make the recesses darker, but also sort of two things in one. If I use the sort of dirt colour, I can introduce some dirt and grime into those recesses as well. One of the things I've found in the past is when I've done this, whilst I really like the look of it, it's can often be quite a soft way of doing the recesses on your miniature. And whilst that can look lovely, if I'm doing it primarily to try to achieve a more dramatic separation between parts of the model and better definition, then actually that's not working for me so well. So I could just thicken the wash up. You see here, it's pretty good. It's dried there. It's not bad at all, actually, making the wash that little bit thicker. But there's still certain areas on there, like the top of his foot, that panel line we've got there, and other elements that aren't quite defined enough for me. So I'm going in now with a brown acrylic paint, and I'm just going to paint some of those recesses in with the brown acrylic paint. It's kind of like black lining. I'm just doing it with brown here, and I haven't had to do much of the model, which is really handy. I was expecting to have to do a lot more of it, but that consistency I did with that dark brown, and all I'd used for that dark brown oil wash was the brown and the black that we used earlier on the model. And I'm also taking the opportunity here to do a little bit of chipping with the brown paint as well. I knew I'd want to do that. Didn't see much point in doing it until this sort of stage when the mini was more or less put together. The oil wash that I've done there, that has had maybe 15 minutes to dry since I put it on. That you can see here, it dried very, very quickly. That oil had been sat out on the cardboard for a good few hours, so most of the oil had actually leached out of it. And then it was applied in such a dilute manner that the white spirits evaporated off very, very quickly. And we were good to more or less move on straight away. Very few metals on the model. I liked that. As much as I love painting metal at the moment, I'm quite enjoying models that don't have too much of it on there. Wanted to keep it super simple. Usually I use Iron Warriors by Games Workshop mixed in with Vallejo model colour Burnt Iron. I'm having a few issues with some Citadel paints recently, and I've recently picked up the P3 set, so I've been using those a little bit more. So I've just done the same thing there. I've mixed that boilerplate with the Vallejo metal colour. I tried the Rattling Grime again. You'll see on a recent video I tried it. I had a disaster with this new pot. I shook the absolute bejesus out of this pot on the Vortex mixer, everything, mixing ball the lot. Still did exactly the same thing to me. So that's a more or less brand new pot that's just been eaten into the bin. So I've gone back to using oil washes here for my metals. I'm really sad. I don't know if I need to go and pick up one more pot of Rattling Grime and see, or maybe the thing has just changed on it. So typically on finishing touches, I will just sort of, tweak things and be done. But here's where I was mentioning a minute ago, I wanted to go in and in some cases completely change an area. But I think it is finishing touches because we are more or less complete with the Mini now, but it's allowing me to make better decisions and not settle necessarily for things I've done. So like I said about the face, I need to brighten up that area. I made a complete pig's ear of the dead guardsman head on there. I tried Blood for the Blood God and it just looked awful on there, which is annoying because I really like that paint. So I don't know what I did wrong there. But yeah, go back in and repaint that. And then I think I need to just do a little bit more scratching and stuff on some of the armour. So I've gone in and, just like I said, really brightened up the tusks. I think it's made a huge difference actually to the face area by having them darker at the root, whilst in and of themselves I think they look cool. I think on the black helmet I don't think it worked terribly well for separating those areas. The eyes, I went in. Am I going to show you the eyes now? This is me without my notes in front of me. Yes, I am. So here I go in and white out the center of them again to bring, obviously, whites and bring some of that brightness back to them. And then I think I just chose the wrong blues as well, to be perfectly frank. So I've gone for Talisar blue here instead. I think that Pilar Glacier just it didn't have enough to it to be interesting. But this white with the Talisar over it was perfect. This just gave them that extra boost that they needed. That little bit of extra colour, that little bit of extra drama on the face. There's nothing else on the model that's blue. Basically everything is black, red or brown. So it was lovely adding in that little touch of extra colour. And I guess the yellow on the axe, they really do a lot of work. And then I went in and spent a good few minutes just doing tons and tons more scratches using very dilute Towelite ochre, just to, I say, weather up the armour. And I, again, deliberately weathered some panels more than others to give me a bit of variety across the model, again, to try and tell that story of him being a very... He's been a naughty boy for a long time. So maybe he hasn't always looked after his armour so well. Then a little bit of brightness on the metals with the oil wash over them. It's dulled them down slightly. So I went in with pig iron here. So that's a slightly brighter silver than boilerplate. So you could use something like Iron Warriors and... Yeah, Iron Breaker, I guess that would work. Just two silvers with a decent step between the two. And then just very, very select, minimal bit of silver on some of the armour edges as well, just to add an extra dimension to those. I really, really think that was a big benefit to the overall finish of the model. And for the base, I just copied what I did on the dark walls, but I stopped before I did the pigments. I'm not quite sure. It's not quite right. I think the colour is good. I think the base could look a little bit nicer. I basically ran out of time. But yeah, happy with the colour. Somewhere between the Black Templars project and the Dark Walls, and this is the basing I want to be doing for my 40k stuff. I will figure it out. Maybe I need to actually dedicate a few days to really sort of playing around with it. And here I've just done a little bit of a rust oil wash, predominantly on some of the black areas, because it just felt like it lifted them a little. I like using lighter colours to bring definition into black, and something like a nice bright orange, like a burnt sienna, is really, really effective for doing that. And again, not just slathering it all over, but just a bit of deliberate application where I thought it would have the most impact. And there he is, all done. And I think looking pretty cool. Well, do you know what? Looking really cool. This is the nicest Red Corsair I've painted, and I've done a few. I actually found this, I did this for a video a year or two ago, this conversion, and I really enjoyed it, but at the time I felt I'd really let myself down with the paint job on it that the conversion deserved, and he fell off a shelf, he got battered, broken, all the rest of it. So he needs redoing. The idea was that this was Corin Sumatras, which was a character from the Badab Wars that he had made it through, but he'd been possessed and blah, 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 all the rest of it. But, you know, I think it's night and day, the paintwork here. The guy, the Terminator I've done here, I think is just how I've envisaged them in my head. So I am determined to, at the very least, go back, strip this Corin Sumatras guy and give him another go using this method, because I would really love to see that model in my cabinet, just to make me happy for no other reason. And I guess that's it. That's what this model has been. I've had a similar level of satisfaction to this as I got from the Nurgle Death Guard guy. That realization of a vibe and a feel and an atmosphere that I picture when I think of Red Corsairs and when I think of 40k. So there's elements of nostalgia in there that have inspired me. There is that grittier, more grimdark feel, but without it, I think, being overly murky and requiring, you know, a black background and harsh lighting and things like that. This looks nice in natural light, and on the shelf and everything. But going back to what I spoke about at the very top of the video, this is about realizing something I've wanted to do for a very long time, and why am I waiting to do it? Just get on and do it. So I guess, without sounding all worthy and all the rest of it, like, do it yourselves. Like, let me know in the comments, what's the projects that you've had in your mind for ages and you're not doing them? What's stopping you doing them? I know what's been stopping me for things like this is this concern that I can't paint well enough to realize what I want to do. Turns out I can for the Red Corsairs. So what's stopping me? Absolutely nothing. Got all these kits. Let's just sit down and paint a Red Corsairs army over the next few years. Just every random Chaos kit I get can turn into a Red Corsair, and I'll have this wonderful army sort of on the shelf if I want to. And I can pick one up 1 week, not touch it for 6 months, pick another one up, and it doesn't matter. They will be close enough to each other and tell the same sort of story that they can work together in an army. And that's really, really exciting for me personally. I don't have the wherewithal at the moment just to sit and knock one army out in 1 month sitting kind of thing. Now, if you've got any questions about anything I've done in this video, pop them down in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can on it. Thanks very much for making it this far through the video. If you have, hit that thumbs up button, hit share, all the rest of it. It really helps us out on channels like ours to sort of spread the word and get the visibility there. I know this hasn't been a typical sort of tutorial. I hope there were useful things within it, particularly say around the oils and the stuff I was talking about during that. But the main thing is, what did I learn during this process? Well, I'm a little bit better at painting than I thought I was, which is always really nice because I've been a lot of doubt recently to do with it. The reason I say that is because I was able to realise what I wanted to realise. I'm not saying this is an 11 out of 10 paint job, but it's better than I thought I was going to be able to achieve with realising the picture I had in my mind of what I wanted this model to be. And I just needed to sit down and pick up a brush and enjoy myself. So that's what I've learned. Basically nothing, but I hope it was entertaining and has kept you happy whilst you've been doing some of your own hobby or commuting or all the rest of it. So take care, and I'll see you next time.